In general, the reviews I've done on this channel tend to be pretty positive. This is mainly because I review visual novels and light novels which aren't all that popular in the West, and there's no real point in saying, hey, you know this story you've never heard of? It's really terrible, and although you never would have thought of reading it, I'll tell you anyways that you really shouldn't read it. That's just a complete waste of time. So yeah, for the most part I tend to only review things that I think are pretty decent. Today though, I feel the need to emphasize that what I'm going to be reviewing is not only decent, but bloody brilliant. It's probably the best story I've reviewed on this channel, and certainly among the best stories I've ever read. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Rewrite. Rewrite's plot is pretty difficult to describe, or at least to describe without any spoilers. Here's a quick start though. Our protagonist, Kotaro, is going to high school in Kazamatsuri, a city surrounded by forests and known for containing some of the world's leading environmental research facilities. Kotaro mourns that he's been wasting his youth and decides to attempt to revive his school's occult club to remedy this problem. This, of course, is an entirely original premise that's never been used before, and certainly not one that Key's ever used before. Anyways, he manages to recruit 5 other members who just so happen to be our heroines for this story. And that's as much of the background as I think I can cover without going into spoilers. Pretty much you have the common route, which mixes happy pappy slice of life with a growing sense of mystery and foreboding until everything goes right to hell. Then you get into the character routes, you finally figure out what's going on, and the stakes get raised like crazy. The best way I can describe this novel is what Clannad would look like if it were fused with Fate Stay Night. It has all the slice of life comedy and heart-wrenchingly sad moments that Key is known for, but it also has magic, mystery, intrigue, epic fights, and legendary monsters. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Also, this is one of those VNs with a true route, so after you finish all the individual heroine routes, you get 2 more routes, Moon and Terra, that wrap the story up. Can't really discuss them for obvious reasons, spoilers, but they do a really nice job of tying everything together. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our main cast for this story. Introducing slightly less cynical Tomoya, the Witch, Tsundere with a katana, Tsundere with a lamppost, Eye Patch Moe Blob, Flower Moe Blob, Comic Relief Delinquent, and last but certainly not least, definitely not Archer. Jokes aside though, all these characters are quite well developed. They often play important roles in other characters' routes, not just their own, and all the routes have their own distinct styles. Lucia's route is a horror mystery type affair and is written by the same writer who did Higurashi. Chihiya's is a standard, if well written, action shonen story. Shizuru's route, while having a bit of action, went more for the standard Key route and had me bawling my eyes out. Akane's is all about politicking and intrigue, and finally Kotori's route was all about the feeling of helplessness and bravery in the face of adversity. Now, normally in a VN with this type of diversity, I would expect some of the character routes to be a bit below par and drag the story down. But in this case, I'd have to say all the characters and all the character routes are pretty darn good. I have my favorites certainly, but there's no real complaints against the others. A complaint I've had with a lot of visual novels that do the whole slice of life thing in the common route is that they start with way too slow a pace. Rewrite addresses this to a large extent by having a large element of mystery introduced early in the story. This goes a great ways to helping keep the reader's attention beyond simply what humor can achieve. Moving on to the rest of the VN, Rewrite probably has the most in-depth and well-written and certainly the longest story I've come across in visual novel format. All the character routes develop different aspects of the world and the central conflict that this story revolves around. The true route ties all the character routes together, and it ends with a brilliant climax that wraps everything up perfectly. Rewrite also does action well. Key isn't exactly known for producing action-heavy series, but in this case, the fight scenes were comparable in quality, and in some cases, quantity, to those in Fate Stay Night. I can't say quite as much as I'd like to about this without spoilers, but let's just say the story abounds with superpowers, deadly villains, and occasional dragons and dinosaurs. Not only that, but Rewrite also does romance well. The growth of relations between various heroines and Kotaro in each of their routes is well paced and charged with emotions. I'd start out completely convinced of my OTP at the end of one route and have my mind completely changed by the time I got to the next one. This all probably sounds completely over the top, and to be frank, I am a huge Key fan fanboy, but I'll be damned if I don't think that this story is a masterful piece of work. So for all I just praised Rewrite, it's not without its flaws. The most obvious thing that comes to mind is the feels moments. You know those moments in key works like Little Busters and Clannad that just have you bawling your eyes out? Well, Rewrite didn't do those moments quite as well. That's not to say that the moments were done poorly here, that's certainly not the case, they just weren't done with the same level of effect, which is to say I only cried once reading Rewrite. Take that as you may. My other complaint is that some of the character route endings could have used a bit more of an epilogue. I know this probably wasn't done since there was a true route coming up after, but I can't help but feel that some characters, especially Kotori, really got gypped. On that note, I also have a slight complaint about the true route too. There was some attempt to do some romance stuff in Terra, but not nearly enough time was spent on it. I think the writers assumed that since a certain character relationship had been developed in a previous route, they didn't have to do all that much work with it in the final route and could just focus on other aspects of the plot. I don't know, maybe it was good enough for some people, but I felt like they could have just added another hour or so to the game and used that time to actually develop the romance in the final arc into something that I could care about. Finally, and somewhat ironically, since I just suggested adding more content to this game, I should mention that Rewrite is very long, clocking in at well over 50 hours. If you actually want to get through this story, it's a serious time commitment, so you probably shouldn't even think about reading it unless you've got a lot of time to burn or you're willing to space it out over a couple of months. As far as I'm concerned, you should absolutely read Rewrite, if you have the time available. I don't know what else to say that I haven't said up to this point already, but seriously, give it a try. Even if you haven't read a visual novel before, I'd say, length aside, this is a pretty darn good introduction to the genre. If you've already read Rewrite and are looking for something else to read, I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest Magikoi. Similarly to Rewrite, it has a mix of slice-of-life comedy and action, but it also has a much lighter tone and never gets quite as serious. So if you want to read something slightly less intense after finishing Rewrite, this is a great choice. I guess also, on the flip side of the coin, if you do want something that's also epic and for whatever reason you haven't read Fate Stay Night, I would highly recommend that too. Anyways, thanks for listening to my review, I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers!